Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week, I spend about 15 minutes covering key legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have such an important topic to talk about. Now, last week, I talked to you about your EEO compliance program, Equal Employment Opportunity, which of course is about preventing harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. And after that show aired, I got so many questions about retaliation. What is retaliation? How do you prove retaliation? How do I know if somebody's retaliating? How do I make them stop retaliating? And it dawned on me that sometimes we use these terms and we just think everybody understands what they mean. And retaliation is one of those things that is actually pretty tricky. So first of all, I want you to know that there is a definition of retaliation in California law. There's also a definition in federal law, and any other state that has an equal employment opportunity sort of statutory compliance program, they define retaliation. And retaliation really at its base is when we treat someone differently in a negative way because they have raised a concern in the workplace. So maybe they've participated in an internal investigation. Maybe they have gone to human resources about a safety issue. Maybe they've raised a concern to their supervisor about a wage hour issue. Maybe they don't think they're being paid overtime correctly. Whatever it is, the employee engages in conduct that we want them to engage in, right? We want them to speak up if they feel they're not being treated fairly. We want them to tell us if there's something wrong with their paycheck. We want them to tell us if they think somebody might pose a risk of harm to the workplace. But then they get punished after. And the punishing is obvious sometimes. Because you made that complaint, I don't trust you anymore, so I'm not promoting you. Okay, that happens. It's really dumb when that happens because it's so obviously retaliatory, but people do it, right? People just can't control themselves. Or somebody will say, oh, I heard you participated in that investigation. We don't like rats around here. I literally just had that with a law enforcement agency where I did an investigation. And this woman didn't have a choice. She was compelled to meet with me. And yet her coworkers refused to speak to her because they thought she was a rat. It just boggles my mind that people treat each other like that. But it happens all the time. So a couple of things I want you to focus on when you talk about retaliation. First of all, in human resources, I want you to be on the lookout for retaliation that doesn't look like retaliation. Okay, it's not obvious. Something like, oh, a group of us decide to go to lunch and Jen, the complainant in a recent investigation, isn't invited. But, she's not really on our team and she was on the phone when we left, so we just didn't think about it. Okay? Could that be retaliatory? Sure, it could be. The problem is you have to talk to people and you have to get into their psyche to figure out if it's retaliation, because retaliation requires intent, right? Retaliation is, I am punishing you because you engaged in what we call protected activity. Again, it might have been a complaint. It might have been you spoke up about a safety issue. It might have been somebody made a complaint about you. Remember, the respondent in an investigation, when they're interviewed, they are engaging in protected activity. So they too have to be protected against retaliation. Now, think about that for a minute. Is it retaliation to take corrective action against someone who participated in an investigation and was found to have violated company policy? Of course not. That's not retaliation. That's you being held accountable. Remember, there has to be a causal connection between the protected activity and the consequence. In that example, the consequence is not because they participated in the investigation. It's because they engaged in inappropriate conduct. Okay? So there always has to be a causal connection. So when you're investigating a retaliation claim, one of the things that will be the hardest to examine and to reach a finding about is that causal connection. Is there a causal connection between what the person is complaining about? I didn't get a promotion. People didn't invite me to lunch. I didn't get as big of a raise as somebody else. Okay, all of those sorts of things could be retaliatory, but there has to be a causal connection. There has to be a if this, then that, right? So the person engaged in protected activity and then they were denied a promotion, and there's a causal connection because we have some evidence that there was a causal connection, right? There was something that happened. Timing is often what we look at. They were interviewed on a Friday and on Monday they were reassigned. Well, that temporal proximity, that timing can really be an important thing for us to look at. So when you're looking at retaliation and you're trying to either evaluate whether it happened or decide what to do about it, having a solid policy is critical. You've got to have a policy that defines what is retaliation, what conduct violates your no retaliation policy, where does somebody go if they want to complain about something they perceive to be retaliation. Remember, they don't have to be right in their protected activity. So let me give you an example. I make a complaint at work that I believe I did not get a promotion because I'm a woman. Okay? HR investigates it, not the case. I didn't get the promotion because I didn't do the 7 things that my manager clearly outlined in my most recent performance evaluation that I needed to do to be eligible for a promotion. And I didn't do it. I just flat didn't do it. Yes, I'm a woman, and yes, I didn't get a promotion, but when you examine that and you talk to the manager and you come back to me and you say, well, Jen, it says here in your performance evaluation that there were 7 things you were supposed to do before you were going to be promoted. And you ask me, did you do those things? And I say, well, no, but I have a reason, right? And I explain all of that. If you decide it's more likely than not that I didn't have a legitimate reason for not taking those steps that are outlined, there's no retaliation. Right? I complained though, and I complained in good faith. I thought it was retaliatory. So now if my manager says to me, well, now you're really not getting a promotion because you made this silly complaint, even though you didn't even do those 7 things in your performance evaluation. Now I am not going to give you the promotion because you were dumb enough to make a complaint. Now I have retaliation. Do you see that? Even though my initial complaint was not substantiated, I have now been treated differently in a negative way. I'm not getting a promotion because of that complaint and my participation in the process. So now I have a valid retaliation claim, even though the underlying protected activity did not substantiate any wrongdoing. That is why retaliation can be tricky. That's why you really have to be clear about what somebody's allegations are and what they're thinking about and what they're doing and how they're approaching these situations, right? What is their complaint? What is their beef? How are you going to unravel it to figure it out? Okay? So it's really important to understand that when you write your policy and you do your training about retaliation, you got to be really specific. Look, retaliation isn't just obvious things like not getting a promotion. Retaliation could be things like, I sat at your desk when you were on leave and I moved all of your files. Now you might be thinking, are you kidding me? That's pretty petty, Jen. Yeah, it is. Maybe. Or maybe I have a really important filing system and you just mucked it all up. And you knew you were mucking it all up and you did it because you're mad at me because I complained about your best friend not wearing a safety harness on the job. You see how it can be so attenuated and so complicated. It's like an onion that you have to peel each layer to actually get into the middle and figure out, okay, what actually happened here? So you've got to do your very best to have an effective policy, to do training on that policy, and to hold people accountable to that policy, even if they're your favorite people, right? We know this. I talk about this all the time. You have to treat everyone there like they're your favorite person, okay? When you're talking about actions you're going to take as the employer. There are going to be people you like more than others. There just are. There just are. We're human beings. If you tell me you treat everyone exactly the same, I'm not going to believe you. You don't. You can't. You're human. My mom doesn't treat my sister and me the same because we have different needs. We have different expectations. She has different expectations for us. Does that mean she's unfair? No, she's actually very fair. But we're not the same people, so she can't deal with us the same way. So I want you to really think about retaliation, not on this sort of basic level of, okay, somebody was mistreated because they engaged in protected activity, but delve down. How do we know they're engaging in protected activity? How do we make sure that confidentiality is maintained as much as possible when somebody makes a complaint so we can minimize the risk of retaliation? This is why I don't interview everybody on a witnesses list sometimes. When they say, I want you to interview these 47 people. Say, you know what? I don't need to interview the 47 people. And the more people I interview, the more risk we have of retaliation. So I'm going to minimize the number of people. I'm going to talk to enough people to figure out what I think is more likely than not to have happened. But I might not interview everybody on your list, not because I'm not doing a thorough investigation. I'm trying to prevent retaliation. I'm trying to prevent the backlash. I'm trying to prevent the spread of gossip, right? And people chit-chatting about what's going on with this issue, with this complaint, with this problem. So retaliation is something that you need to spend time talking to your leaders about. They need to be able to look at a situation and say, I wonder why Jen wasn't invited to lunch in that scenario we talked about earlier, right? What's going on here? I need to really have my fingers on the pulse of my team and what is making them tick. And is somebody being left out? Is something happening that I need to be aware of? I'll tell you what's really tricky: when the people at the top are doing the retaliation. Oh, it happens. Because you know what? The higher we get, the sometimes more disconnected we feel, and we don't even realize we're doing it. So the CEO tells you, yeah, Jen, she's not a good team player. Well, why do you feel that way? You used to really like her. I know I used to, but there's something about her now. Well, when did you make this decision? I don't know. It's just been something over the last couple of months. You're going to have to drill down. Is it awkward? You bet. That may be a time when you decide to bring in an external investigator because you don't know if you can get to the bottom of that internally with someone who's at the top of your organization. That's actually a very common reason why employers will bring in a third party to do an investigation. But the bottom line is you've got to get to the bottom of it. You can't let senior leaders and the VIPs skip or slip away from those kinds of issues. When we're talking about retaliation, you've got to be willing to ask them the tough questions just like you ask everybody else. Because retaliation is very damaging to the workplace. Not only is it a potential lawsuit and something that juries love to award large damages for because they put themselves in the shoes of that person who's been retaliated against and they want to help them. They want to give them a remedy because they imagine how tough it might have been for them to actually go through that situation. So they love to give money on retaliation claims. I mean, millions of dollars is not unusual. So you want to have your program in place. You want to be able to explain what retaliation is, hold people accountable, make sure people can identify it. This is obviously going to be covered in your equal employment opportunity training that you do, your compliance training, but it also has to be something that is recognized in your handbook, that you talk about in management training, you talk about in employee training. You really make sure people understand the extent of your organization's commitment to preventing retaliation at work. It's the only way to recruit and retain. It's the only way to make sure that you get to bring in and keep the best employees. If they see retaliation, even if it doesn't happen to them, they lose confidence in the organization. So it is worth the time. It is worth the resources. It is worth the energy. Get your retaliation house in order. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I know we're almost through this month. I can't believe it. I'm hoping the fall weather comes soon. Keep up the good work, and I'll see you next week. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others, post about it on social media, and/or rate and review it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.